My name's Mark Parham, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a property investor, and in today's video we're going to be explaining why I rent this house rather than buying it. So come with me, let's have a look around and I'll tell you all about why I rent this place. So I guess you're going to want to know how much I pay for this place, and what I'll do, I'll break it all down as we go through the video. So when I moved here, I had the option of buying it. It was £2.2 million, or I had the option of renting it. I decided to rent it in this instance because the reality was, when I looked at the financials and when I looked at the pros and cons of both, it just worked out that renting was better for me. Let me go through exactly why that is. So it wasn't actually an easy decision to decide to rent this, because we've always traditionally bought, but when we started to look at the figures and break down exactly what each would mean, it just made sense to rent it. So for example, the first thing that we looked at was the amount of deposit we'd need to put down. So to purchase the house, the deposit was going to be nearly £400,000. That's a huge amount of capital to put down in that instance. In order for us to rent it, the deposit was only £5,000. You can see the attraction straight away. Stamp duty on a property like this alone would be about £150,000. And because we were only ever going to live here for 1 or 2 years, 3 at the absolute most. We didn't at the time know about COVID, obviously, but you know, our intention was to be here between 1 and 3 years. It just didn't really make any sense to part with that amount of stamp duty on this property. When I tell you about the figures, it's going to blow your mind about how cheap this is in comparison to buying when you rent it. So obviously the deposit, that's a big thing. 400k left in your bank account, you can do a lot with that sort of money. The 150 grand of stamp duty, also, that's a big saving. So we're talking about £550,000 less by renting it, left in my bank account that I could then put to work. Now with £550,000, I can make about £10,000 a month. If I just put it into off the peg investments, I'm talking about stuff where I'm buying HMOs that are ready to rock and roll, you know, single lets, BRR projects, all that sort of stuff. Nothing too complicated, but I can easily make £10,000 a month. And for me to rent this was only £4,750. Now I appreciate only £4,750. I get it. But at this point, we'd built up a portfolio of 13 properties, generating over £20,000 a month. That amount of money just didn't seem unreasonable at that point in time. But what I want to do, let's go into the studio. I really want to go onto the whiteboard and outline the pros, the cons, and the reasons that we really have gone the way that we have with this property. So here we are, we're in the studio. Let's go through the figures and I'm going to run you through absolutely everything. So it's great to be here in the whiteboard and actually go through the details with you. So what I want to highlight is not only the cost, and I understand that the cost is important, but there's also an element of flexibility that renting gives you that you don't have when you purchase a property. So let's go through all the pros and cons for this property, and I've sort of categorized them. I've categorized them in order of the cost. So for example, the deposit, when you're buying the property, it's £2.2 million property. So the deposit was going to need to be 400k for us to purchase this. Whereas when we were renting, the deposit was only 5,000. The tax, as I said, when we're buying it, we've got to pay a large stamp duty bill. That would be 150k. Renting is 0. When it comes to the mortgage/rent, it was about the same, okay? Because there would still be a mortgage outstanding on this of 1.6 million. And borrowing 1.6 million at 2.2% on a repayment basis, I believe it was a bit more than 5k, but I remember at the time looking at it and going, it's about the same, right? So the mortgage and rent was about the same. However, the big thing for me was by buying it, I wouldn't have any flexibility. I wouldn't be able to move out if my situation changed for the better or for the worse. And by renting it, I have all of those options available to me all the time. So while someone else might find that as a negative, you know, that somebody else could, in theory, decide that you're no longer going to live in your house. So for me, I looked at it the other way around. I was intending on living here for between 1 and 3 years. I got a 1-year contract. I knew my landlord wanted to sell the property eventually. In fact, he offered me an option contract on it, so I could have bought it. I just didn't want to buy this. I didn't see it as my forever home. And I think unless it's your forever home, when you're dealing with these sort of numbers and you're only going to be there for a year or two, there's no point in buying it. The next thing I looked at was capital expenditure. So obviously things go wrong on properties of this size and things need to be maintained. I don't have any of those issues. And I'll give you a couple of really good examples of things that have gone wrong that are fairly large here. Number one would be the boiler for the main house. And there was 2 boilers. It's a big house. It's 6,000 square foot. So the boilers went wrong. wrong. They were up at the top. He tried to fix them over and over and over again, a couple of £1,000s down doing that, and then had to replace them both anyway. And that would have been a £4,000 or £5,000 big outside boiler and big installation. You know, it's a big deal having to do all that. The next thing I can think of was the garage door. That stopped working, needed to be replaced. The motor needed replacing. We had a big storm and some tiles came off the roof. I mean, I can think of lots and lots of things over the 2 years we've been here that have just gone wrong. I mean, they're not major. These are things that would go wrong in any property. I own 13 houses that I rent out. Boilers break, I know this. Garage doors break, of course they do. You know, but when you've got a property of this size, then you really do have to keep on top of those maintenance issues, and they are expensive. So the other thing that I would say is, now I've been here a couple of years, you know, we are, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, but we are depreciating the fixtures and fittings, right? A bathroom only lasts so long, a kitchen only lasts so long. We normally think about 10, 15 years at the most in any rental property, let alone something as high end as this. So we're depreciating those items, and I know with the quality of the materials and the sheer scale of the property, to refit out all those bathrooms, there's 6 of them, to refit out the kitchen, we're talking probably 100, 120k, something like that. It's all quartz cabinets, top-end appliances, you know, we've got Miele ovens and all that sort of stuff. We're talking big money to replace all those items, and I'm depreciating them while I'm renting them. So in terms of capital expenditure, my landlord is going to be left having to replace all those, whereas I am going to leave here having depreciated those items, not negligently, nothing, you know, I've not done anything negligent, but at the same time, they do depreciate over time. So from a capital expenditure perspective, renting again is superior. The last thing I've got on here is capital appreciation. Now, I know that during the period I've rented this property, it's probably gone up by 100,000 or so. So my landlord has made 100,000 in capital appreciation. I could have had that, but that for me still doesn't outweigh the benefits of having to pay the tax, the deposit, and all these other things that would have happened anyway. So for me, financially, as well as just for my own well-being and being able to move on when I'm ready, if my situation gets better or worse, I can do either, you know. If my situation gets worse, I can move somewhere cheaper. If it gets better, I can move somewhere better. So I've got the complete flexibility. And I have to say, during COVID, when my situation has fluctuated significantly, that's been really, really comforting. And I think that can be underestimated, just how valuable that flexibility is. Imagine if tomorrow I started earning an extra £10,000 a month and I wanted to move into something significantly bigger and better, then equally I couldn't, if I bought it, I wouldn't be able to move into that quickly. Whereas now I can give a month's notice, put down, let's say £10,000 a month on the next house, just put down 10 grand rent, and away we go. It's very, very easy and very low cost when you actually look at the big scheme of things. Now, the last thing I want to make a point of is the opportunity cost. Okay, and we kind of touched upon that outside. And what I mean by opportunity cost is when you tie up all of this capital, this £550,000, you can no longer invest it. So this money still existed. I had this money, I still have this money. I have invested it in different ways. So I've used this money to buy other properties that generate a superior income. So I bought a property in Didcot, which returns net about £2.5 grand a month. I bought another one in Wellingborough, which returns net about £1,000 a month. I bought the one up in Corby. I bought many properties off the back of not sticking all my money into this deal. And now if you look at my net worth and what that generates for me, my landlord might have made the capital appreciation of 100,000 on this property. I think I probably made about 300,000 in the same period in rent, in capital appreciation on the properties I have, and the BRR projects that I've been involved in. So for me, everything about renting this was right, and buying it for me would have been wrong. Now, I completely appreciate you guys might be in a different situation, or you might view it differently. My wife was very anti-renting originally. She was very much like, I want to own where we live. Having rented here, she's very keen to rent. She now understands the flexibility and just the fact that we can move on to something nicer and better whenever we want, with no ties at all. So what are your thoughts? Having watched this video, having looked at the figures, have I changed your mind? Have I changed your perspective? I hope I've given you my perspective. Obviously, how you implement that's up to you. But for me, this was definitely the right move, and for my family, it has definitely been the right thing for us. So let me know in the comments. I massively appreciate every single one of you. Please like and subscribe. And as you know, we're going to be back on Friday when we're going to do a bit more of a vloggy style thing. But I'm sure Nick's put some amazing graphics in here. There's probably been some amazing B-roll. We're just getting used to working with each other. So I hope to see you again on Friday. I've been Mark Parham. Thank you so much.